Hello, everyone. I'm going to be summarizing what happened today on the Dr. Oz show with the author Cherlyn Cadle with the letters from Christopher book she wrote. So first, Dr. Oz goes through the whole story between Chris Watts and Shanann Watts and what exactly Chris Watts did to his family and how it shocked the entire nation. The first thing Dr. Oz says to Cherlyn is that she's never written a book before and that she's never even written to a prisoner before. So why would she reach out to Chris Watts? And she said it really caught her attention when he was doing the news interview trying to find his family, and that he wanted his family back, and she could tell that he was guilty at that point, and that she felt called to write this story and get inside his mind to see why he would do something like this. So then Dr. Oz goes on to say, with Chris's letters in his hands, about how he told her he smothered the girls twice. So Cherlyn went into that story and stated that Chris had went into the girls' rooms and smothered the girls, each one with one of their pillows that were on their beds, and then went into the room with Shanann and decided to strangle her. And then as Chris was wrapping Shanann in the sheets, both girls came walking in and seeing what Chris was doing to their mommy. They asked their daddy, "What are you doing with mommy?" He had said Bella had been crying and that she had been traumatized, that he could see it in her face, having bruises on her eyes. He had said Cece was more confused. He said that they ran around the house and cried while he was getting Shanann down the stairs, dragging Shanann down the stairs because she was too heavy for him to pick up. So then he got Shanann in the back of his truck on the floorboard, and then he was able to get Bella and Celeste on the bench seat where the seat was in the back, and their feet were dangling on top of their mom's body. And at that point, the entire audience just gasped in disgust. And they had rode like that for approximately an hour to the oil field to their burial in the oil tanks. And then she mentions that they trusted their daddy to take care of them, and mentioned the video that Bella had done with "Daddy, You're My Hero." And then Bella was the only one that put up a fight. And Chris had said that he will hear Bella's soft little voice for the rest of his life, of her saying, "Daddy, no." So then Dr. Oz goes to ask Cherlyn how she feels about the whole situation of him killing his little girls. And she compares it to her granddaughter, which she said is about the same age as Cece, is 3 years old. And it's been very hard for her. And at this point, when she's trying to explain her feelings, she is beginning to tear up. You can hear it in her voice. And that she doesn't even want to think about her granddaughter skinning her knee. And that something like that causing physical pain to her granddaughter hurts her. And that this journey has been very difficult for her, and still with that choked up voice. So then Dr. Oz goes on to ask her, because he wants to get inside the mind of Chris Watts, as all of us do. And shockingly, she told him that Chris had the, I'll put in my words, the audacity of asking her, Cherlyn, that if Chris was out of jail, would Cherlyn trust him to watch her granddaughter, making her feel like he has enough remorse to where he will never do something like this again. And she goes on to say, absolutely not. Christopher, what are you thinking even asking me something like this? Dr. Oz asks her, does he think that he's trustworthy by him asking her that? And that she said he thinks he is trustworthy and he's narcissistic, and that everything is about him. So then, like the rest of the world, Dr. Oz explains that he has been looking for clues, just as we have, on how Chris could have done something like this, or clues leading up to something like this. So Cherlyn goes on to explain that he was and did seem like a seemingly good dad and a really good father, and that he spent a lot of time with his girls. And she asks Chris, so why would you go and do something like this and not get a divorce like all the other millions of people in the world who get a divorce? And as she's trying to say what he has told her, she kind of chuckles, because he goes back and he tries to blame everybody else for his actions. Blaming the mistress and the fact that he didn't pray for 3 months before this happened. That there was a darkness over him, and that he's gone as far as saying that they may had been a demon in him. So then Dr. Oz goes to mention the mistress and says, so he basically blames his mistress, that if he had not met his mistress, nothing like this would have ever happened. And Cherlyn agrees, because that is what Chris has actually said. And during the whole part from here on out, they had the banner at the bottom that says why he says his family would still be alive if he hadn't met his mistress. And they intentionally left that bar at the bottom during almost the entire rest of the show. So that makes me wonder, maybe he is thinking the mistress might be a little guilty just because he says that, and he left it there for maybe the US and the whole world to see that. So then she tries to drop that subject and says that Christopher is very not outgoing and very closed off, and she never saw any emotions from him. She states that she didn't see him laugh or cry. Excited, and he's been very quiet, and that he's been really hard for her to read when she goes to visit him in the prison. So then Dr. Oz explains he's going to be talking about possible demonic possession, and goes on to reading a part of Chris's letters to Cherlyn, stating that on August 12th, he said, when I finished putting the girls to bed, I walked away and said that's the last time I'm going to be tucking my babies in. I knew what was going to happen the day before, and I did nothing to stop it. I couldn't stop myself from what I knew would occur the next morning. Now, if that doesn't scream premeditation, I don't know what does. So the letter goes on and says, I'm so thankful the Lord has delivered me from whatever evil was tormenting me and my family. I just wish they were still here. So then Dr. Oz began to ask her what Chris says about killing his family, and that he knew he was going to do it ahead of time, but he couldn't do anything to stop it, like I just read. He felt a darkness over him, and that when he killed his family, mainly Shanann, when he put his hands around her neck, he could not let go. It was like a force holding him, forcing his hands on her neck. And that looking back at it, he knew he should have pulled his hands off, but he couldn't. And that he told her that he could have killed anything in his path that morning and be justified for doing it. So then Dr. Oz goes to explain his confusion that he has with Chris Watts' letters in his hands, and how he provides scriptures to Cherlyn in his letters, and he always says, in Christ and God bless to her. And he asked her if she had ever asked him if he ever killed any animals or anything bizarre in his childhood. And she states that she did ask, and he says that he never did. But then she smiles and she goes to say that it was pretty interesting because their dog Dieter, the only surviving family member, did not like him. She laughs and said, did the dog sense something? Which I truly believe that's a possibility, because animals do not like something that they will fear. And she says, or was it because the way he treated the dog? And they both agree that it could be both areas. So then Dr. Oz reads off a part of his letter again, stating that Chris said that the darkness inside of him had won. He felt like he could kill anything and be justified for doing it. So then Dr. Oz asked Cherlyn that if she felt unsafe in his presence. She says that she didn't feel safe with him. She felt safe with him is what I mean. Because there was always at least 3 guards around them. And the chair that he was seated in across the table where they sat together, he was not allowed to move from this chair. And then Dr. Oz goes to talk about Trent Bolt. He does not say Trent Bolt's name, but he does explain that a man came forward stating that he claimed a relationship with Chris Watts and what Cherlyn thought about that and what Chris has said about that. So she smiles and she claims that Chris had said that he didn't even know about this accusation until after the sentencing late November was over and he was in prison. That he had no idea who that person was and denied anything of any relationship with a gay man. Speaking on this gay relationship, I'm going to be making a video in the future, so make sure you are subscribed. I'm going to be going through some very detailed information that this could be a possibility. And all the other cheating allegations could also be true. Then Dr. Oz goes to ask Cherlyn that if she believes she can determine whether or not Chris is lying or telling the truth. And that she could kind of tell when he was telling the truth and that she was not kidding. His eyes would go dark when he would talk about the murders. She said it was very strange to her, and she asked Chris if anyone has ever told him this before since the murders, and he said that he had been told that his eyes would go dark when he was asked about the murders. So then they move into talking about the Ruseks, Shanann's family, and how they responded to Cherlyn's book, Letters from Christopher. And they said that they had been led to believe that the focus of the book would be of him finding redemption through Christ while in prison for his crimes. And now they feel deceived because this is a true crime storybook. And it was devastating. And that this crime has been a tragic loss for not only them, but everyone who was close to Shanann. Those who deeply loved their daughter and grandchildren. Miss Cadle took advantage of Mr. Watts and willfully deceived a family in mourning over a still very recent and tragic loss, says the Rusek family. So then Dr. Oz asked Cherlyn that if she intentionally did this about her book. And she says absolutely not. And that when she first started writing the book, the word went to Shanann's parents. And their attorney had called Cherlyn. She said that they made a deal together. And they asked her if she was going to share the money of the book with the Ruseks. And she said she had made a deal with Christopher that there would be no money exchange between them, and she explains that he can't have money anyways. So in exchange for that she would write about his forgiveness and redemption, and at least one chapter of the book would be his. And the Ruseks had said that she promised them an advance copy of the book. But she said that's not correct, and that she asked their attorneys if they wanted to have a voice in the book, and they told her no. And Cherlyn explains how her heart hurts for those people, but she told them if they didn't want to have a voice in the book, that she was not going to let them read an advance copy of the book. And she goes to explain that her book is no way bashing Shanann or the children, and that she never intentionally meant to hurt the Rusaks. And she wanted the book to help them so they can move forward in their lives. So then Dr. Oz goes to read a part of Chris's letter again on August 13th, the morning of, in Chris's words. I went to the girls' room first before Shanann and I had our argument. He went to Bella's room and then the Cece's room, and he put a pillow from their bed. That's why the cause of death was smothering. After I left Cece's room, then I climbed back in bed with Shanann, and our argument ensued. After Shanann had passed, Bella and Cece woke back up. I'm not sure how they woke back up, but they did. So then Dr. Oz has a panel of an investigator reporter, CNN and HLN legal analyst who is an attorney, one of my favorite guys on HLN, Joey Jackson, and crime correspondent Melissa Moore, who her father was a serial killer as well. So the reporter states that these crimes are more horrifying than what we originally thought. And she was so nauseated by the way he was just detached from explaining about the crimes that she reached out to a psychiatrist. And he said this is all typical signs of a psychopath. And that psychopaths don't view people as people. They view them as objects to be manipulated. So then Dr. Oz goes to talk about demonic possession and what the panel's thoughts on that is. And one of them say that he is demonic. There's no question about that, but the idea of him being possessed is unbelievable. Being possessed in a temporary way. And it's unbelievable because he doesn't seem remorseful. She said if the demon was in him and the Spirit of God is in you, you would be on your knees crying buckets every night about his lost family. And that Chris only cares about himself, his image, and his future. And that he seems to think he'll be getting out of prison. The other lady on the panel goes to say that she doesn't believe in any type of supernatural event and that he had just snapped. She said this is something that's been building up for a very long time, if not years. She said this type of psychopath, grandiose, and narcissism, and that this is nurture and nature coming together. And she's learned in her studies that there is a genetic part of this. She believes that he was predispositioned to do this, and the motive being with Nikki drove him to do this. And being that her father was a serial killer as well, that they are basically all cookie cutters of themselves. And she could read Chris Watts' letters and see her father in those letters. And that her father also did chase after a mistress. And that she thinks the reason for these letters of Chris is a reach out to his mistress, Nichol Kessinger, to come reach out to him. And to start talking to him. Now, Joey Jackson, the attorney, disagrees and says this is not a genetic issue. He believes the issue relates to Chris and his way out because he was very self-interested and he wanted a way out. And that it's ridiculous to blame things on demons and spirits, and that he needs to sit down and start blaming things on himself. And he goes to explain that any normal person, we would die for our children. But what does Chris do? He kills all of them. And Joey says that he sees an individual that wanted his way out. This is the way he took. And as a result, that's why he's serving 5 life sentences. So then Dr. Oz goes back and talking about Chris's conversations with author Cherlyn Cadle. And Chris said that he's convinced that if he's well behaved in prison, he will be freed from prison in 25 years. So Joey chimes in and he says, that's what we call delusion. And he says, the fact is he's going nowhere. And so then he goes on to say that rehabilitation for Chris is basically nearly impossible, and that us as the public, would we feel comfortable with Chris as our neighbor or in our town next door? No, we would not. And Dr. Oz says, is there a chance for him to possibly have an appeal? And Joey says that when you are pleading guilty, and that he would not have a chance to have a plea again because he already pled guilty all their murders. But he did say if he does try to get an appeal and a new trial, so then he says if he did get that trial, what jury would state as much evidence out there as there is of Chris Watts murdering his family would say, hey, you're not guilty, we'll set you free. And he said that is not going to happen. So basically, there is still an opportunity for him to appeal. And that's coming straight from Joey Jackson, and he is an attorney. So then they turn the page and start talking about the mistress, Nichol Kessinger. And Dr. Oz says and mentions about her saying to Chris that she wanted to give him a son. And at the same time, the wife that he murdered was pregnant with a son. And then Dr. Oz asks one of the panel members if they knew where Nichol is right now. And she says they do not know where she's at. But she is cooperating with authorities, and there are reports that she's in the witness protection program. So she's starting a new life with a new identity. But she seems really concerned about what that new life looks like. Then she brings up with Nichol Kessinger Googling Amber Fry, Scott Peterson's mistress. So she's assuming that Nichol wanted to look up Amber Fry to see what her life looks like now, 10 to 15 years later. She does express that Chris said that she was the motive for the killings. Dr. Oz brings the question of if they think that Chris Watts would have killed the mistress, Nichol Kessinger, too. And she said it's very possible, and it's the classic discard of a narcissist, that if Nichol is no longer useful to him, and he finds another mistress, then yes, she's out of the picture, and possibly dead. So then Dr. Oz goes on to a piece of Chris's letter, and it states from Chris, I can say with certainty that I will always love Shanann. But there was always this lingering fear that I would do something wrong. It broke me down spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. Was I aware of it? I don't think so. It's like the frog that was put in a pot of full water, and slowly the water turned to a boil, and the frog boiled to death. I didn't see what was happening until it was too late. And that mistake cost me the chance to grow old with my family for the rest of my physical life. So then Dr. Oz brings on forensic criminologist Casey Jordan, who also appears on HLN a lot. She goes on to say that his psychology is nothing like a serial killer. She compares Chris Watts to a mass murderer, the family annihilator. He's the type of person where he had to murder his entire family to have a clean slate and start a brand new life. And that's what he admits to in those letters. And that he was like a teenager, so intoxicated by Nikki's sex and the love. He was like a child, a teenager in love. So he had to get rid of his family to be with his mistress. Now he brings up the possible demonic possession with her. And she says that this is an effort from him to see how he's perceived by us, the public. Basically putting the blame on something else and not himself. And they changed the subject to Chris's old love relationship video that he had posted on YouTube. I'm sure a lot of us has seen that. I'll try to post the rest of the video on here. And that video was made 6 months before he married Shanann. And she doesn't believe that Chris ever really loved Shanann, and he was just doing what society expected him to do. And she compares him to his image in that video where he's overweight to when he comes physically fit before the murders. And she thinks with his transformation that possibly he thought that I can kill my wife and children and then I can be with Nichol. And that wraps up the Dr. Oz show. So let me know what you guys think below. I'm sure some of us have learned something new from this. I also wanted to let you guys know that I'm going to be, I have the video of the Dr. Oz show with Cherlyn Cadle and the panel that he had on there, trying to get inside the mind of Chris Watts. I'm going to be posting that to my Facebook page. So I'm going to actually pin a comment once I get this video uploaded, and that will direct you. Hopefully I can link that to my direct Facebook page. If not, you can find me on Facebook under Melissa Jamiva Fam, and I'm uploading it, and then it should be on there for you to view if you were or are not able to watch it. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great night, and thanks for watching.
My name is Chris Watts. I'm doing my communication speech for Brenda Armentrout, and welcome to Broomfield, Colorado. About 70 degrees, and it's awesome outside, so welcome. I'm doing my speech on relationship deterioration and repair, and this is my PowerPoint to help me. Deterioration. The relationship begins to fall apart, crumble, or fail. You have weakening bonds. You get bored of the everyday routine, and you get distractions such as work, hobbies, relationships, no matter how harmless, even at the job. You might meet a new person, and it could strengthen into something else, and could weaken the bond you have with the partner you have. You spend less time with each other, and sometimes you have no time to maintain the relationship. Sometimes in a relationship, you maybe make promises that can turn into a major betrayal, or minor arguments that could turn into things where you could say spiteful comments, which turn into bigger problems. The first phase of deterioration is interpersonal dissatisfaction, which when you become unhappy with all the everyday interactions with you and your partner. You also begin to view your future with your partner as a negative future. And the second phase is interpersonal deterioration, which you start to grow farther and farther apart. And you share less of your free time with each other. You have more awkward silences at dinner, or when you're just out by yourself, you don't talk at all. You disclose less of your feelings, and you show less affection toward each other. When you have good communication, you show more nonverbal communication, which is the majority of the messages we send, like through gestures, facial expressions, eye contact, the tone of your voice. And there's many types of forms of communication these days, and it's the most successful groundwork for relationships. A few quotes that I've done research on from Elaine Schemberg: all relationships problems stem from poor communication skills, which is very true. And another quote from Schemberg and Sorjan: you can't communicate while you're checking your BlackBerry, watching TV, or flipping through sports section, which is very true. With technology nowadays, you'll be on your iPhone, your BlackBerry, at a restaurant, and you'll see two people at a table, and you'll see both of them on their phones, either Facebook comment, status, or maybe playing the game, and there's no communication at all. Commitment is the degree of commitment affects your relationship. According to Hirofumi, not surprisingly, commitment is especially strong when individuals are satisfied with their relationship, and grows weaker as individuals become less satisfied. You have to ask yourself 3 questions when you're in a relationship. Do I have a desire to keep this relationship going? Do I have a moral obligation to stay in this relationship? Or is it a necessity for me to stay in this relationship? According to my research, sometimes a necessity could be children. Sometimes when you have children and your relationship starts to deteriorate, a child could help repair it. All relationships are held together in part by a form of commitment, either based on desire, obligation, or necessity. And when the commitment is strong enough to hold the relationship together, you avoid arguing about minor disagreements and you support one another. When commitment is weak, the relationship is full of doubt and the relationship deteriorates faster. You have 2 types of deterioration. You have sudden and you have gradual. Sudden would be an example of infidelity. When somebody is not faithful to their partner, the partners realize that the relationship cannot be sustained. Gradual would be if you met somebody at work or a new friendship has occurred, and as it goes on, you see that, okay, maybe this relationship has more potential than the relationship I have with my partner. And that would gradually push the old relationship out and push the new relationship in. Reasons relationships start to fall apart. Sometimes you no longer find your partner attractive, physically or in their personality. When you're in a relationship, you have to show desire, lust towards your partner. Sometimes when you get married, that the lust and the desire kind of falls by the wayside a little bit. But if you want your relationship to keep going, I would suggest maybe go to a place where you first met, or go bungee jumping, go somewhere that will bring the excitement back. You no longer experience closeness, or when your differences become more important than the similarities, you just pick apart your partner, and you don't see anything that you have in common anymore. You just see something he or she does, and it just gets on your nerves, and you just can't let that go. And you feel you might do better with someone else that you've met. You think that you can no longer that your partner is someone that you can't be with. When you feel you are putting more into the relationship than you are getting out. According to Bloomstein and Schwartz, when a relationship breaks up, it's generally the more attractive one that leaves, which I agree with somewhat and then I disagree with. When in repair, the stage is not always pursued. Sometimes people, when the relationship starts to dissolve, repair is not an option and they want to get away and start new. When you want to go into repair, you need to analyze what went wrong and consider what ways of solving the problems. You need to consider changing your behavior or perhaps changing your expectations for your partner. And you might also want to evaluate how you could feel in the relationship if it had ended. One of the first stages of repair you need to recognize, identify the problem. What changes you need to make the relationship better. Avoid words like always and never. If you say this to your partner, it just makes the relationship makes it backtrack. you'll never get to the repair stage. You need to take responsibility for your feelings and not blame your partner. And you need to be descriptive when discussing grievances. Resolution and conflict resolution. You need to look closely for relational messages that will help clarify motivations and needs. Exchange perspectives and see the situation as your partner does. You need to own your own feelings and thoughts. Use active listening techniques. Listen to your partner. Make sure they feel wanted. Make sure that they know that you're there and not in space somewhere thinking about the baseball game that's coming up or the football game that's coming up, which I sometimes do. And think clearly before saying things you may later forget. Don't just blurt out something. Just think about it. Don't just, if something comes to your mind, then it might be wrong. I do that too. And keep channels of communication open. Always disclose your feelings. Don't keep things bottled up because it will later come back to bite you. Possible solutions. Discuss solutions that both you and your partner win. Don't have a win-lose solution. The win-lose solution, sometimes when somebody loses, you'll have hostility and you'll have resentment. Sometimes they may not show it, but they will be thinking it. Need to affirm each other. Support each other, positive evaluations, positive feelings. Always disclose your feelings, as I said. And cherish the gestures. It's a smile, a wink, a kiss, maybe just a hug, anything at all. Solutions into normal behavior. Say you're sorry. Sometimes it takes a lot to admit that just to say you're sorry, but it helps. Risk rejection by making the first move. Be willing to change, to adapt, to take a new task and responsibility. And in conclusion, I'd like to say that relationships are hard, but they're worth it in the end. And as the Swedish proverb says, a double joy is a shared joy, and a double sorrow is not a shared sorrow. Thank you.